Welcome to the BuzzFlix, bringing you the latest news from around the world. On July 30th, 2025, a digital alert flashed across global trading desks. The Supreme Court had ruled on American Importers Association vs. United States. At 1 a.m. Eastern, the court struck down the proposed 10% universal tariff on all imports, a cornerstone of Trump's economic agenda. The reaction was immediate. The Dow Jones surged over 800 points in an hour, and European and Asian markets rallied. The US dollar fluctuated, while currencies of major trading partners strengthened. For months, the looming tariff had frozen investment and threatened price hikes. The court's decision released a wave of optimism. Inside the Supreme Court, the justices faced a fundamental question: who truly holds the power to regulate commerce, Congress or the president? The ruling reaffirmed that the power to tax and regulate trade lies with Congress, not the executive. For Americans, the impact was personal. No sudden 10% price hike on everyday goods. Relief swept through households already battling inflation. Yet, for some in manufacturing, the decision was a blow, ending hopes for protection from foreign competition. The court's decision didn't just move markets, it redrew the lines of economic power in America. A new chapter in the nation's trade debate had begun. Donald Trump's trade stance was never a secret. It defined his political identity long before the presidency. He saw trade deficits as proof America was losing, blaming unfair practices by countries like China and Germany for factory closures and job losses. This message resonated in the Rust Belt and fueled his 2016 campaign. As president, Trump withdrew from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, renegotiated NAFTA, and launched a trade war with China. He used national security as justification for tariffs, marking a sharp break from decades of bipartisan support for free trade. After leaving office, Trump doubled down, making a 10% universal tariff central to his platform. Supporters claimed it would bring jobs back, shrink the trade deficit, and boost federal revenue. Critics warned it would spark retaliation, disrupt supply chains, and raise prices for American consumers. Major business groups argued it would devastate importers and retailers. The plan became a lightning rod, exposing deep divisions over America's role in the global economy. It wasn't just policy, it was a declaration of a new vision for the nation. The stage was set for a legal and political showdown. The tariff debate was about to reach the highest court. The legal fight against the universal tariff began swiftly, led by the American Importers Association and major business groups. Their argument: only Congress can impose such sweeping tariffs, not the president. They cited the Constitution's Commerce Clause and argued that past tariff actions were targeted, not blanket taxes. The government countered that the president has broad authority in foreign policy and economic security. The case sped through the courts with a preliminary injunction blocking the tariff. The Federal Circuit upheld the injunction, agreeing the president had overstepped. The core question: was this a legitimate use of executive power, or an unconstitutional grab? The Supreme Court agreed to hear the case, recognizing its national significance. As oral arguments approached, the nation watched, knowing the outcome would shape the balance of power for decades. The stage was set for a historic decision. The Supreme Court's 6-3 decision drew a clear line on presidential power. The majority opinion by the Chief Justice focused on the Constitution, not the economics of tariffs. It affirmed that only Congress can impose broad-based taxes like a universal tariff. The court found no law granting the president such sweeping authority. If Congress wants to delegate that power, it must do so explicitly. The ruling was a strong reaffirmation of separation of powers. The dissent argued the president needs flexibility in a fast-moving global economy, seeing tariffs as a tool of foreign policy. But the majority insisted the power to tax remains with Congress. The decision checks executive authority and forces future presidents to work with lawmakers on major trade policy. The message imposing tariffs that affect all Americans requires congressional approval. The constitutional balance was restored. Minutes after the ruling, Trump fired back from Mar-a-Lago, calling the decision a betrayal of American workers. He accused the justices, even his own appointees, of siding with globalist elites. Trump framed the ruling as a political attack on his America First agenda. His supporters echoed his outrage, organizing rallies and demanding Congress grant the president tariff authority. Traditional pro-business conservatives, though relieved, stayed mostly silent, hoping to steer the party back to free trade. The GOP's internal conflict over economic identity erupted: free markets or protectionism. Democrats and opponents of the tariff celebrated, calling the ruling a victory for the Constitution and American families. They argued it prevented a trade war and protected consumers from higher prices. The decision gave both sides new ammunition in the ongoing economic debate. The political battle lines were redrawn overnight. The court's decision created instant winners and losers. Import-heavy businesses, retailers, electronics, automakers, saw stock prices soar, relieved of looming cost hikes. For consumers, the threat of a sudden 10% price increase vanished. But domestic industries hoping for protection, steel, some manufacturers, agriculture, felt abandoned. Workers in these sectors saw the ruling as a setback in the fight for American jobs. Meanwhile, those in logistics, retail, and ports welcomed the stability. The decision reignited the debate. Do lower prices outweigh the loss of manufacturing jobs? Economists argued the tariff would have been a regressive tax, hitting low and middle-income families hardest. In the short term, shoppers breathed a sigh of relief. The long-term debate over America's industrial base was far from settled. The economic divide was sharper than ever. The Supreme Court's ruling reignited a fierce debate over America's economic future. Free trade advocates, economists, business leaders hailed open markets as engines of prosperity and innovation. They warned that tariffs hurt consumers and risk global instability. Legal scholars praised the court for upholding Congress's authority over trade. On the other side, economic nationalists and labor groups saw the ruling as a blow to American manufacturing. They argued free trade had hollowed out towns and cost jobs, and that tariffs were needed to level the playing field. For them, the decision favored Wall Street over Main Street. Some legal experts said the court's view of executive power was too rigid for today's world. The fundamental disagreement over trade policy was sharper than ever. The battle for America's economic soul was far from over. The Supreme Court's decision revealed a nation divided by geography and economic reality. In financial centers, the ruling was celebrated as a win for global stability and predictable markets. Investors and executives saw the tariff as a threat to supply chains and economic leadership. In the industrial heartland, the news brought disappointment and a sense of being left behind. For many, the tariff was a promise to fight for local jobs and against foreign competition. The ruling deepened feelings of alienation in struggling communities. National debates played out on cable news and social media, but in small towns, the conversation was personal, about lost factories and disappearing opportunities. The decision became a symbol of two Americas, one thriving in a globalized world, the other searching for hope. The ruling favored Wall Street's optimism, but Main Street's pain remained unresolved. The economic identity crisis at the heart of the nation was laid bare. The divide between coasts and heartland had never been clearer. The Supreme Court's July 2025 decision was a turning point in American trade and constitutional law. By blocking the universal tariff, the court reaffirmed Congress's power over taxes and trade. Markets calmed, importers and consumers cheered, and a feared global economic shock was averted. But Trump and his supporters saw betrayal, and domestic industries felt abandoned. The ruling exposed deep divides between regions, industries, and visions for America's future. The debate over trade, power, and national identity was far from settled. The decision forces future administrations to work with Congress on major trade changes. The real question now, what should America's trade policy be? The anxieties that fueled the tariff push, job losses, wage stagnation, and globalization's costs, remain unresolved. The challenge ahead, building an economy that is both prosperous and fair for all Americans.